So in case you missed the previous video, I have successfully installed 2 MAXXAIR fans in the van now. I'll link part 1 in the description if you want to check out the beginning of this process, but as for this is part 2. This is the step where I made a plastic adapter for the fan, and again, just like the other one, I filmed this as a tutorial just with all the intricacies explained in case you want to literally follow along the process and make your own, or you just want to brainstorm off of it, but just so it makes sense as to like what I'm doing and why. And so, just like part 1, here's a timestamp of when the actual tutorial begins. But first, I'm going to explain why, because I know a lot of people are going to be like, like what are you doing? I'll show you guys. I have to get on the roof to show you exactly what's up. And also, since I've done this twice now, because I have installed 2 fans in my van, I'll mention some things I may have done a little bit differently so as to make the process the most efficient and easy. Okay, so why do I need an adapter? Because, so here's the fan when it's open, but the roof has these ridges, and so although I could cut the full square, like, this is really hard, in between the first ridge and the second ridge, like, the fan is so long that when it closes, I used the plastic adapter just to raise this so that the fan would have more clearance above these ribs instead of sit right on top of it. So here's what the whole thing kind of looks like. There's the wooden frame that I made in part 1, the plastic adapter that I'm making in this video, and then the plastic fan frame. The fiberglass roof ends up sandwiched between the wood frame and the adapter. So when it comes to the plastic adapter, maybe some things that I might have done a little bit differently is like the first time around, I only used a jigsaw and it seemed a little difficult. So the second time I experimented with a circular saw, and then for the jigsaw, I had tried a couple different types of blades just to see if maybe something would be better than the other. But honestly, I think I just had it right the first time. That proved to be the easiest. So if I had to do it again, I would definitely just use a jigsaw the entire time and with this blade. Also, I cut the rounded edges straight out of the hard piece of plastic that I had, and then the second time around, I cut the 4 pieces at just like right angles first, and then took a jigsaw afterwards, and then rounded out the edges. After trying it both ways, this time I kind of felt like the second way was definitely easier, for me anyways. To start, here are the supplies. Some plastic. I used this full sheet, but you can also use plastic lumber. I'll link both in the description. The plastic fan frame that came with the fan, a yardstick or just something to measure with, a jigsaw blade. I have 2 here only because I experimented with 2 different kinds, but 1 was plenty. A circular saw, which again, as I mentioned earlier, I found the process to be easier without it, a pencil, and safety glasses. Oh, and I almost forgot, I used some leftover wood from part 1 to help size these pieces properly. Real quick, here is the finished plastic adapter. Unlike the wooden frame from part 1, these 4 pieces are all the same size. They go from the inner edge of the fan to the outer edge of the fan. So in order to make this thing, step 1, grab your plastic sheet, lumber, or whatever you're making your adapter out of. Step 2 is going to be to mark where you're going to make your cuts. To help with drawing this sizing correctly, I lined up my piece of wood with the fan frame so as to represent another plastic piece. Then I flipped it over and lined up the edge of the plastic fan frame with the hard edge of my plastic sheet so that they meet at the corner. Then I traced the fan frame, rounded edge and all, and voila! I had my first plastic piece drawn out. The wood strategy is not necessary. You can totally just measure out the length you need and draw it onto your material, but it saved me the trouble of trimming down any pieces in the case that I measured them to be just a bit too long. Then I measured the width of the template that I just drew and proceeded to recreate it so that I had 4 vertical lines, all the same width apart. Next, I measured out the high point of the rounded edge and drew a straight line across. Now that I have this, I can move on to step 3, which is cutting out my 4 pieces. I started by cutting along the horizontal line. Then I did the vertical ones. I found this step to be the easiest if I started cutting from the outside in. That way the pieces stayed the most stable and didn't start to fall and get caught on the blade, which is exactly what happened the first time around when I cut from the inside out. So now you have 4 pieces that look like this, and here they are on the plastic frame. You could totally leave them as is, but check this out. When you flip it over, which is how it will be in the end, the corners stick out since the frame is rounded. I'm not sure that it would affect anything more than the cosmetics of it, but here's an example of what the rounded edge would look like instead. So my last step, step 4, is going to be to round out the edges. To do this, I laid the plastic pieces down, put the fan frame on top of them, and then traced the round edges from the frame. Then I simply took a jigsaw and tried my best to stay along the line. I think they turned out okay. Then I just had to double check and make sure they all fit correctly. And here's my final product. Alright, so that is how I managed to build an adapter for this fan. Again, this is part 2 of 3 for the whole fan installation set of videos, and I will be posting the next one tomorrow. So until then, peace out, y'all!